Hello and welcome to the Celtic State of Mind live pre-match preview. Today Celtic make the trip to Rugby Park, which has been known for a good few years now to be a tough ground for Celtic. It was initially under Brendan Rodgers where this kind of hoodoo surrounding the ground started to arise and seemed to have sort of put down that curse for the moment. But then we saw earlier on this season in the Viaplay Cup defeat that the curse of Rugby Park still looms in some sort of form. Today I'm joined by Kev McCluskey and Anthony Maguire of Celtic Down Under. Celtic Down Under, they've recently launched a new website where you can find their merch store. You can find that at www.celticdownunder.com. But we're going to get straight into the game first of all. Kev, we had the team selection just come out. Anthony just mentioned to me before we went live that 7 changes from the team that played against Kilmarnock in that initial fixture in the Viaplay Cup. I remember Odin Holm was actually playing that day, if I can remember correctly. But we saw that performance against Kilmarnock previously in the Viaplay Cup, and there was a lot of problems with it. And it's been the same problems from that result that have been arising in a couple of other drop points this season, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm actually going to just get up that team just now, played in the Viaplay Cup, because I hadn't actually considered that one. But yeah, there's quite a lot of changes, because actually, if you look back, because I'm just looking at it now, Tony Ralston started, you had Nadrotsky and Lagerbielke as your back two, which seems a long way away now, because neither of them have been near the team really since then. You're quite right, Odin Home played, you had Maeda, Furuhashi, Abada up front as well. So it's a massively changed team since that match. You'd like to think that since then we've come on quite a bit as well. I think hopefully now there's a wee bit more stability within the team, and team selection's getting there, getting steadier. Some players have improved, but it's been a bit of a strange season for us, because I still don't think we've fully hit a groove yet. I don't think that game has anything to do with that in particular, but I just think we've just kind of just not quite found our groove yet. So hopefully today is a day that we can do that. I think you kind of mentioned there, Rugby Park was always a tough ground for Brendan Rodgers before. It continued to be so earlier on. So there's a lot to play for today. There's a lot of kind of hoodoos to get over and get out the way, get another 3 points and get that gap back up to what it should be going into the next couple of rounds of matches.
Well, Anthony, how do you usually feel going to Rugby Park when you think back to when that sort of initial hoodoo was coming around? Do you think that was just due to the managerial quality of Steve Clarke at the time? Because we're seeing what he's doing in the Scotland national team now. He's clearly proven himself to be a top manager. Or do you think it was more to do with the pitch as well? That's a common thing that fans love to complain about. We've seen people talking about the pitch already in the comments. Is Cameron Carter-Vickers not playing because of the pitch? We'll get to that a bit later on. No Carter-Vickers in the team, I'm sure, will have struck fear into the hearts of some supporters. But Anthony, where do you think the sort of initial hoodoo arose? How do you feel when we're going to Rugby Park?
I have to say, thank you very much for having me on tonight. And it's a shame it's a game on an artificial surface, because I usually dread these games, because usually they're quite turgid to watch. It's very hard to play the free-flowing football that Celtic likes to play. I think Brendan Rodgers' sides struggle because of the way that they move the ball side to side. The ball doesn't quite sort of glance along the ground quite like it does on a normal surface. The pitch does play a part in the match. I mean, Kilmarnock's stats, they sit between 70 and 80% home points acquired in a league season. When you compare to most teams, it's usually 55%. So there's definitely a home ground advantage in them having that artificial surface. I really just hope tonight that we just start with a really good tempo, and I really hope that Iwata and McGregor get on the ball and are able to turn and get the ball moving forward quickly. If we see Phillips and Stales carrying the ball often, then that's a sign to me that we're going to be in for a long afternoon, because the ball's just not transitioning fast enough to sort of break down what I presume will be a deep line Kilmarnock defence.
It's going to be a big game for Nat Phillips. He's, I presume, going to be gone within the next month. I don't see him staying at Celtic past January. I don't know how many artificial surfaces Nat Phillips has played on in his time in the Premier League, but I'm sure we'll be expecting a top performance from him today. You mentioned Tomoki Iwata there as well. I think one of the main problems the last time we played Kilmarnock in that Fireplay Cup defeat was the midfield was too easily overrun. Brendan Rodgers mentioned in the media on a couple of occasions that he thinks Odin Holm needs to sort of bulk up a bit more physicality in his game. So having someone like Iwata, who we've spoken on multiple occasions, has been a very solid defensive-minded player that'll hopefully add that solidity to the midfield that you were looking for. But I want to go to the defence that Rodgers named for today, first of all. Alistair Johnston, Nat Phillips, Liam Scales and Greg Taylor. And you've seen the appearance of Mike Nawrocki on the bench as well, or Nawrocki, sorry. We saw Cameron Carter-Vickers go off at half-time, and I'm sure a lot of fears would have come in to support us there. And you look at the defence that Rodgers has named. Nat Phillips is the player that starts, the player on loan, Kev, as opposed to the centre-backs that he spent all this money on in the summer. But I think what the team selection has revealed to us today is where Brendan Rodgers sees these players in the pecking order. I think his ranking of his defenders' quality is pretty clear now. Cameron Carter-Vickers at the top, Scales second, Phillips is the third choice, Nawrocki's the fourth choice. So where does that leave the likes of Stephen Welsh and Gustav Lagerbielke? I'm not too sure just yet. Lagerbielke seems to have been completely bombed out of the equation. And I didn't think he'd put much of a foot wrong in his early stages at Celtic, but he's out of the picture now, clearly. But I've got our defence named for today. Kev, how do you feel about that? Nat Phillips and Liam Scales?
Yeah, I think any other surface than this one here or the one at Almond Vale, you'd have Cameron Carter-Vickers in your back two every day of the week. It'd be him and Scales just now because that's the partnership that's worked so well recently. And Carter-Vickers is, for me, the best centre back in the country. So if he's fit, you play him. But I think given his fairly recent history of injuries, especially kind of with the knees, I'll speak from experience with that. I've done my knee in a few times playing on AstroTurf surfaces. So, I can sympathise with Big Cameron if that's an issue that he's got. And if it is, then you take him out in a game like this because you don't want to unduly risk him, especially when you've got Feyenoord coming up in midweek, which is a massive game for us for many ways. I know we're out of Europe and I know it doesn't really mean that much. We can't even get third place, but it would get us a victory in midweek. If we can win in midweek, it gets us that European monkey off the back, first home win in 10 years.
From last season as well.
It's extra cash in the bank as well, because you get the bonus money for winning matches. So maybe with that in mind, you're saving him for that game. You don't want to risk him today. And I think that's probably why Phillips came on against Hibs in midweek. It was just pre-planning. We were 2-0 up, but we're coasting in that game. So it'll be very interesting to see how Phillips plays. I agree with you and I think most of the Acsom contributors that he'll be away in January. I don't see him staying any longer. Again, why is he playing ahead of guys that are signed up long-term for us? Is that rumour that's going around that there's a clause in his loan contract that he has to be involved in a match day squad, pushing him further up the line than he should be? Because you're not going to play Nawrocki ahead of him from the start in a game like this because you haven't given him any minutes in the lead up to now. So he's kind of maybe artificially up that pecking order. But again, he's got something to prove. Whether he knows what his future lies after January, if he thinks he's going back to Liverpool, he's probably playing for his next loan move. So he's I don't know, he's got to put in a big performance today, prove that he's worthy of something. But long term, I think he's away, and I think as soon as January comes, it's the better for everyone else in the squad because then we'll start to get a better understanding of what Rodgers actually thinks of Nawrocki and of Lagerbielke. You say he seems to be bombed out. Maybe there's a loan move for him. I don't know if he was a Rodgers signing or not, so maybe there's something going to happen there. But as for today, to get back to the original question, yeah, happy enough with Scales to come in if it's resting Carter-Vickers and a dodgy knee, and Scales, he becomes your rock at the back for a game like today. And we've said it every week since the start of the season. Could never have imagined saying that during pre-season. And that's just kind of testament to how far he's come on.
Yeah, Scales' rise this season is something that we've heavily documented on the podcast. We've all been raving about that because we all love sort of comeback story. You'll remember in Ange's first season, everybody couldn't stop talking about Anthony Ralston amongst all this plethora of talent that we'd brought in that were all hitting the ground running. One of the players that was getting spoke about the most was Anthony Ralston, who was almost a figure of ridicule at Celtic at a certain point in his career. So it's good to have seen Scales come along. We've got a player in attack today who mentioned that he's hoping to have a similar sort of rise as Scales has had, and Mikey Johnston. We'll get to that just a bit later. We've got the comments coming in, 425 of you weighing in live. Thank you very much for joining us. I mentioned Lord Flashheart's comment. Is Cam Carter-Vickers not playing because of the pitch? I assume so. We saw the rumours popping up a few weeks ago when Carter-Vickers returned from injury, Anthony, that he can't really play 2 to 3 games a week because of this knee surgery. And I'm not too sure if he picked up a knock at half-time or if it was just a precautionary substitution, but no Carter-Vickers for this game. And when I look at that defence that we've named, I'd say that's probably the best defence you can name at the moment. We're seeing a lot of people weighing in on Mike Nawrocki. You can't forget that, first of all, he's not played since he returned from this injury. And second of all, what ground did he pick the injury up at? He picked up the injury with 2 minutes to go at Rugby Park when we played them in the Viaplay Cup. So it's really not worth risking Mike Nawrocki. But as Peter weighs in, I think Nawrocki will come good. Dodgy game. If we go out with the same attitude as Wednesday, we'll be fine. I think so as well. If you think back to that game on Wednesday, we went into that game, Anthony, with the mentality of we needed a response, we needed a reaction. And I think if you go into this game looking for a reaction from the defeat to Kilmarnock in the Viaplay Cup, so like going out there and proving yourself, making up for that result, and then you should be fine, I think.
I think so. I think Iwata will make a difference. Iwata and O, to be honest, that spine of the team is just a bit stronger. I really feel that against St Johnstone, it wasn't until O came on at the 58th minute that our fortunes changed in that match, and he was really the catalyst. And he scored an absolutely cracking goal on Wednesday night against Hibs. But I'd been calling for Iwata for a little while to push Callum McGregor a bit further forward, because I feel McGregor is somewhat wasted in that 6th role to an extent. And I just feel that he's better going forward, and he has the vision and the ability to pick out that pass to catch your Kyogo's who are making those runs. And I feel that the amount of runs that Kyogo was making and just not getting that service that maybe he was getting under the previous manager, it just that's been one aspect of some of the headaches that we've had this season. But I think Iwata's definitely earned his spot, because every time he came off the bench, he looked composed, tidy, he's strong. He's defensively sound. He played right back all pre-season. He basically deputised in that position, and he just gives that midfield 3 a bit of dig. And I just feel that balance at the moment, obviously with Hatate being unavailable, I think that's our best 3 at the moment. That we've got available. Because in fairness, Holmes had his chance, Turnbull's had multiple chances, and so has Bernardo to an extent as well. Although his games are coming in Europe, which are probably against better opposition. But I feel it's Iwata's time, and it's his jersey for the time being if he keeps performing the way he's been performing.
Yeah, it seemed in sort of the first 8-9 months of Tomoki Iwata's Celtic career, Kev, that it was just a case of him filling in wherever he could. He never really seemed to have a place in the team. It was just, we're lacking options at centre-back. You can throw Tomoki in there. We don't have a fit right back for pre-season. You can throw Iwata in there. He'll do some sort of a job. But now it seems like he's found a comfortable position on the park where he can try and solidify his place there.
Yeah, I think, that number 6 area has been a problem jersey for us to fill for a good few years now. I think McGregor's done a good job, but I'm in agreement with Anthony on that one, that he's kind of wasted I don't think he's ready to drop back and be like that deep line playmaker number 6 just yet. I think he's still got something that he can offer, being a wee bit further forward, as good as he is as a 6, and that I think is again, it says a lot about him as a player that he can fill in so many positions. But Iwata for me is the natural number 6, and I mean, me and Paul John have done so many of these shows this season where it's one of the things we've been crying out for. It's like, why is he not being given his chance? And you almost get the impression that Rodgers didn't fancy him. because he was giving everyone else a game. Holmes had a couple of games, Anthony's going through them all, so I'll not repeat them. But everyone seemed to have a shot apart from Iwata. And every time he comes off the bench, he does well. You only need to look at the game at Tynecastle. I think he's come off the bench in that game. He's scored a goal, but he's looked really lively. He breaks up attacks. He starts attacks. And then against Hibs in midweek, his introduction, not to over-exaggerate it, but it's probably one that wins the game, starting him, because it does allow, McGregor steps up one. He becomes more creative. He's a defensive shield that allows Johnston to become more attacking on the right, and Iwata can then drift over there, which allows Taylor to come in and be the inverted fullback that he likes to be. It just gives us so many more options having him there because he's a natural in the position. So I'm really looking forward again to him getting in and seeing what he can do, because I think he can become a really, really big player for us. And I was listening to Thursday's podcast there when JP was on as well. So I hope JP's mate is ready to spend these big bucks in the pram for his other pal. He's going to lose his bet because I think Iwata will get at least 10 starts this season. He has to, because he offers so much to that midfield.
I think as soon as Rio Hitati comes back from injury, I think your midfield is solid right there. That's why I've always been sort of prone when Celtic are looking to sign midfielders, because that midfield is so secure. When you look at Celtic's strongest possible starting midfield, I think it's probably the hardest position to break into on the park. And you're seeing that with Odin Holm not even on the bench today, which a lot of people have been pretty mixed with his performances over the last few weeks. It's Paul Bernardo, Anthony, that's come onto the bench. He's on loan to us until next summer, as opposed to Nat Phillips' loan deal until January. Do you think he's shown enough to warrant a potential permanent move? I mean, when I've seen him play, he's always been all right. He hasn't put much of a foot wrong, but he hasn't exactly set the world alight to really warrant us spending a similar fee to what we paid for Jota for him, has he?
Yeah, it's probably still early days. I mean, we're not even at the halfway point in the season yet. There's obviously a spot in that midfield three up for grabs at the moment. So you like to think that, if you're thinking that we're going to splash, like you say, that sort of amount of money on him, you think he'd be grabbing that jersey and not letting it go, sort of thing. But the only sympathy I have for him is that Rodgers tend to lean towards him for the Champions League games, which I kind of feels, that's a step up. Will he get opportunities? Yes, he will. I mean, I dare say he might feature here. Obviously, depending on how the game's going, he might get some minutes today. So I'm going to sit in the fence on that one and say that it's a wait and see. I think it's still too early to tell. It's definitely not a no, but it's definitely not a yes at the moment either. I just haven't seen enough. And I think you're right. I think it's a lot of safe performances, but that you're going to need that a little bit more, that assist or that goal, something just to really set the place on fire and say, well, yeah, I want to be here. I want to be part of the Celtic team going forward. But then, almost in a way, you thought I was thinking, well, somebody would have to sort of maybe depart to sort of create that space for him to come in as well. But with Hitati being injured, it's a perfect opportunity for someone to grab that jersey. And at the moment, it's Iwata. But I mean, like I said, that can change. Football's a funny old game. So
yeah, considering the talent factor that Benfica's academy has been for European football for the last sort of decade, and even stemming back before that, you're hoping that Bernardo can kick on and find that game soon, because you'd love to have him at the club if he's performing as a top player. We've got 80-88 CFC popping up. Be prepared to drop points today when looking for a bit more optimism on the show here. Brown Warrior, Callum McGregor's wasted as a defensive mid. That's brilliantly obviously from day one, week one under Brendan. I think Callum McGregor's been a solid number 6 for a couple of years now. He has still got plenty to offer going forward as well. As yourselves have mentioned, I think he's shown that for Scotland as well on a good few occasions. I always go back to his performance for Scotland against Spain that shows that he can do it against top teams. It was when people have doubts or questions about him with regards to the Champions League, I always go back to that game. And that was still just within the last year. McGregor needs to be rested now and again, particularly before a Champions League match. I saw a stat, I think it was a few days ago, that was ranking the amount of minutes played this year by footballers across Europe. I think Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes was number 1, but Cal McGregor was still up and in and around the mix. So he's still got the legs to do it, but you're thinking at some point they will be looking to wind his minutes down just a bit so he can maximise the quality of McGregor and not burn him out far too soon. I'm going to move on to the front three now. Mikey Johnston, Kev, has kept his place in the team. I didn't think he set the world alight midweek, but I was championing for him to start that game. I had my fingers crossed that when we saw Maeda and Abada were back in training this week, Brendan Rodgers mentioned that in his press conference. I had my fingers crossed that one of them would be on the bench or perhaps even in the squad, but that seems to be wishful thinking. But do you think Mikey Johnston did enough to keep his place in the team? Would you have brought someone in like James Forrest, perhaps, for example?
No, I think he done enough. I'm probably one of those guys that's been, not going to say anti Mikey Johnston, but I'm certainly one that thinks if he left the club in the summer, same as I did with Liam Scales, to be fair, if he'd left in the summer, I would not have shed any tears about it whatsoever. If he leaves in January, I probably won't either, to be fair. But I think over the last few games and over the last month or so, he merits a place in the team. So if you've got all your wingers fit and available, I don't think he gets a look in. I wouldn't have rushed anyone back for this game because of the playing surface, and it's the same reason why I don't mind so much that we're resting Carter Vickers off if it is just to protect an injury or just protect his body from the surface. So for me, Mikey Johnston deserves his starts. He's come on in some games against Lazio. He did more in the first 5 minutes he was on the park than Yang did in the full 70 odd minutes that he got. Against St Johnston, he was lively. He's involved in at least one of the goals in that game. And against Hibs from the start, I think it was just a case of a player coming in and trying too hard to make an impression and finding out that everything he was trying to do just didn't quite come off. But he was doing well up to a point. It was his final ball. He's kind of always been his problem, though, is he's not been consistent with the final ball. But given the options or lack of options that we've got at the moment, given the fact that he's come in and looked lively in games, I'm quite prepared to say give him the next couple of matches and see what he can do. He's a lad that's playing for his Celtic career. He's a Celtic fan. This will mean a lot to him. If he can't get himself motivated and put in the performances now, then he never will. So it's now or never for him. But right now, as I say, given he's available, I think he's a pretty decent option to have.
Yeah, Mikey Johnston midweek, it was for years the talking point around Mikey Johnston has always been he's got the drive, he's got the energy to take on the defenders, Anthony, but it was indecisiveness in the final third. He would very rarely make an impact, whether that be creating a big chance or even scoring a goal. And I think we saw a similar performance against Hibs midweek where it was running at the defenders, it was taking them on. You were getting excited when he was on the ball, but he wasn't really making anything happen, was he?
Yeah, the Mikey Johnston conundrum is always the end product. Back, obviously, his first time around when Brendan was there, it was obviously injuries marred his Celtic career up until this point. It was good for him to get away last season and get some game time and just get some consistent minutes week on week. So it seems, touch wood, at the moment he's at least been able to eliminate the injuries from his game, which is important. But yeah, it's still that final ball. It's shooting in the wrong time. Whether he lays it off and just that decision making, and that's the big question for Mikey Johnston. And I think Brendan Rodgers also questioned his work rate off the ball as well, because he's obviously comparing him to someone like a Dyson Maeda, it's chalk and cheese. I agree with Kevin. He's playing for his career. I mean, his career's been at a crossroads now for 3 or 4 seasons. He's going to have to make it or break it at some point. And he's got an opportunity at the moment because we've got injuries to 2 key wide players, Abada and Maeda. So he's not going to get a better opportunity in a Celtic side to have a run of games. I was with you. I thought he deserved his opportunity against Hibs. He was also part of the reason why we kicked on against St Johnston. But I'd say it was a line ball performance midweek. It was just he wasn't bad, but he wasn't good. He was just average. So we just probably need a little bit more. And just if he can create 1 or 2 chances then that's what we're looking for, because that's what he managed against in the St Johnston game. That flick to Kyogo was pivotal for setting up one of those goals. So if we can just have a couple of interventions like that, then I think that's a step forward, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think I read that Brendan Rodgers had said during the week in his sort of pre-match media duties that Mikey Johnston was one of the most talented players he's seen come out of the Celtic setup. And I can't remember if he said it exactly. He said something along the lines of being one of the best ever as far as talent goes to come out of the Celtic Academy. It was just a case of applying himself that has been the real problem. But we're hoping he can apply himself to the game today and put in a top performance. You've got Luis Palma on the opposite wings. I think there's been a lot of discourse following Celtic's Champions League exit of who's European calibre and who's not. I've had the same sort of conversations surrounding the summer transfer window as well. I think Luis Palma is of that calibre that fans are demanding that we should be looking for. He's been a bit inconsistent in his first few months at Celtic, but the highs are incredibly high. He's turned in a few top performances. I'm sure if you're just after Christmas, if you're looking at some of the best individual performances of the season so far, you could probably have 2 or 3 Luis Palma performances in there, because he turns in some exceptional individual performances. And I think they've done the same against Hibs midweek, don't you think, Kev?
Yeah, I thought he was really good against Hibs. He frustrates at times though, because he likes to just come inside too often. I think he needs to vary his play a little bit more, because he's definitely a player that's got bags of potential. I'm a little bit on the fence as to whether I would say he was truly Champions League level just yet, and it's because of that. There's games he kind of telegraphs what he's going to do. But against Hibs, and I mentioned this, I think, in the halftime show in that game, there was a point in that first half where everything he was doing was becoming too obvious, and he had to start hitting the byline. Then the first time he does, he sets up the second goal. So if he could just vary his play, he's got it in him that he can be a game changer for us. He's there's a little bit of the Mikey Johnsons in that one as well, because it's a consistency element. But as soon as Palma delivers more, if he can just keep that going, then I think we do have a really good player in our hands. But I don't always want to be negative when I say this. There's a reason why he's with Celtic at the moment and not playing elsewhere. We can help him get him to that level, which I think is what we should be doing for players like Louis Palma.
Yeah, I think there was something I picked up on in his first sort of 50 minutes in a Celtic jersey when he came on against Feyenoord in the first Champions League game, that he seemed pretty one-dimensional, but he wasn't really hiding it well. And against Hibs, his main game is cutting inside onto that right foot. But against some teams, even seeing the Champions League level, he's afforded a bit more space. He can really cause some problems. But the final position I want to touch on is the final position on the park that we haven't covered yet. That is Oh Hyun-gu up top. 2 goals midweek. He keeps his place. I'm sure Kyogo would have been kicking himself on the bench, seeing O coming in and then scoring 2 goals straight away. I've seen Kyogo. He's only got, I think it's 1 goal in his last 8 games in all competitions. That's just from the top of the head. I could be wrong with that one. But his game had slowed up. That would have been a bit of discourse. How do you get Kyogo more involved in the game? And the decision Celtic have taken is to drop him, and you've brought in O. And do you think he can really take these opportunities and run with it, Anthony?
I think for the time being, yes. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that Kyogo will start midweek against Feyenoord in the last Champions League game. But I think for today, O's on a bit of a high. He scored 2 goals midweek. I mean, one was a back heel. It was, yeah, you could argue that one was CCV's goal or not. But he's on a bit of a crest at the moment. So I think you've got to ride that wave when someone's in form, and I feel that he's in form at the moment. So I totally get why Rodgers has picked him this afternoon. It's a plastic pitch. The ball's going to be played up in the air. He's going to be up against a couple of big burly defenders. So yeah, I think definitely it's horses for courses to an extent, but I think he's playing well, and it's not like it's. Kyogo will be back in midweek. I've got no doubt about that. But I just think that for the moment he's playing well and he deserves another start. So hopefully he could get a couple of goals today and make it an easy afternoon for us. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I thought when Rodgers first came in, you were identifying the players that you thought Rodgers could work well with, the players that he could take to a new level. and all seemed to fit the exact sort of dynamic that you'd think Brendan Rodgers usually looks for in a striker. And he seems to be hitting that form now that we saw in the latter stage of last season under Ange. That's the clock struck 12 o'clock. Kick-off will be very soon approach over the next minute or so. So we're going to leave it here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this pre-match preview broadcast. We'll be back at half-time to discuss what will hopefully be an encouraging and positive first half performance from Celtic. I think it was around 400 of you watching at the peak. So thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you at half-time.